Hi guys, welcome back to a new video. So in this video we're looking at the footage of my talk at the National Army Museum about the kit and equipment and the uniforms, etc. of the Vickers Machine Gun teams of the Great War and of the Second World War. So it's a really good experience to really do that. The footage is a bit of a mix. So the main part is courtesy of my friend Matthew Moss from Fighting on Film podcast, etc. and from the Armourers bench, who kindly filmed it for me. That's the main bulk, and the beginning bit, just because Matt wasn't able to get the start of the talk, is just courtesy of Richard Fisher, who runs the Vickers Machine Gun Research Collection and Association. I've probably got that around the wrong way. The Vickers Machine Gun Collection and Research Association. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. So the start of it is from his footage, etc. So courtesy to him. I do say to, if you want to get a decent look at the actual talk itself, go to his channel, the Vickers Machine Gun Association YouTube channel, to watch the full talk there. Obviously the full talk's here as well, but the quality's quite better on his, just because I was wearing a mic, etc. So I really do urge to go and over to watch that, because it really does help out his channel, and to help with the work he does, because it's amazing, absolutely amazing. It was because of that association and Richard that I was able to do this talk, so I really do appreciate that. So I've managed to get the beginning of it just in there, and then obviously the rest of it is from Matt. So hope you enjoy. It's a bit different on the channel, so but yeah, so hope you enjoy.
Right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming. This is the talk on the kit and equipment of the Vickers Machine Gun team, so during the Great War and the Second World War. So we'll start off right from the start, so with the Great War. So if like the number one would like to step onto the stage. That way. So here we have a machine gunner of the early part of the war, well, sort of mid part of the war. He's got his 1905 cap on. He's has standard service dress, 1905 service dress, puttees and boots. He's carrying the tripod for the Vickers machine gun. So you see it has over his shoulders, piece of carry, and it can be quickly deployed. And we won't do that here in case we want to lose some furniture. Let's turn around again. So he's carrying his 1908 pattern webbing equipment. This has been set up in pistol order. So we have the 1914 pattern pistol order, so holster and pistol cartridge case. He also has his haversack on the back, which contains all his equipment and so forth. But he will be carrying, obviously, just mainly the tripod. So we have the number two. The number two carries the gun. The number two is carrying, as I said, is carrying the gun. Also, fixed to the gun is it's sort of miniature tripod. It's for sort of very quick deploy use, etc. Obviously, you can go on to the main tripod yourself. He's carrying again 1908 equipment in pistol order, obviously with 1905 cap, puttees, boots, etc. He's also carrying the spare parts kit and the tool kit for the gun. He's got his mess tin on the back, his entrenching tool, his rain cape, his haversack on his hip, just for ease of use. Also gas equipment wise, he's also carrying his hood, his gas hood. The PH, H, depending on which part of the war, depending on the gas threat at the time. And that is the number two. So this is a member of the Machine Gun Corps at this point, which was formed in 1915. And number three. So we have a member of the Guards Machine Gun Corps, or regiment, so forth. This is First Lifeguards. I'll just stand to the side. So obviously the Lifeguards are a cavalry regiment. At one point when they adopted machine guns, obviously he has his cavalry equipment on. So this is the 1903 cavalry equipment. There is a 1903 infantry version. This is the carry one. He has extra bandages on his back. He's also carrying the haversack, which he's been able to throw over his back and carry it there. He's also carrying the condenser hose and ammunition, as well as his own personal equipment, pistol order, etc. Also has a steel helmet. So around about late 1915, the steel helmet begins to sort of almost like a trench shorts kind of thing. It's issued to guys in the line. Later in the war, around 1916 onwards, it becomes a general service issue. People want to wear it all times on the front line. So the steel helmet, and we have the puttees and boots, etc. Next up, so we have the number four. So standard pistol order, sometimes depending on the use, maybe just carrying some infantry equipment, but in pistol order in this sense, this is Mesopotamia. So the British Army and its empire was fighting all over the world. The Mesopotamian front was no different as well. So he has his pith helmet, Worsley pith helmet, and light order, he has his wool flannel shirt, shorts, puttees rolled up over his socks, and all his boots as well. And he's also carrying ammunition for the gun itself. Thank you very much. Over to number 5. Again, these sort of rolls, number 6 will come up as well actually. Obviously these rolls, as well as the number 4, are carrying ammunition for the gun. The gun needs to be fed with ammunition regularly. These containers contain 250 rounds of ammunition, and constant flow of ammunition will be brought forward, as well as water, obviously to keep the gun cool, well, to stop it going over boiling point in that sort of sense. They also carry their weapons, their rifles. Gentleman on the far side is wearing early war uniform of the Dorset Regiment, back India, 1913-14, carrying the 1903 infantry equipment. So this was a bandolier and a belt, all in leather, which was later replaced by the 1908, which you see here in its full form. Obviously here as well with later gas equipment from this gentleman, his small box respirator, also with all the accoutrements of that sort of nature, his bayonet, etc., and his helmet. Thank you very much, guys. If I missed anything, please let me know. So now we move on to the Second War. So the Machine Gun Corps was formed in 1915. The disbandment was in 1922, so it wasn't overly long-lived. But machine guns carried on in British service right up until 1968. But during the Second World War, the machine guns were formed into machine gun battalions. So like the Middlesex, etc., the Kensingtons, and all that nature. So for number 1, looking forward. So here we see a member. So we have a number 1 gunner carrying the tripod, as like in with the First World War, but also carrying the dial sight. The dial sight was newly introduced with the Vickers machine gun to create more accuracy, etc., and also to better linkage with other guns as well. So dial on to one central point. Also carrying light order, so we have cartridge carriers rather than the standard 37 pattern large pouches like we see on one of our other members here. So it was light order for wouldn't be carrying a rifle, sometimes depending, but generally wouldn't be. As I said, he's got anti-gas equipment as well. This is probably a Mark 6, I believe. Yep. And he's also, this is sort of the Italian theatre as well. So he's wearing denims, so light order, more like a workwear kind of dress. Helmet has been slightly updated, new liner, generally new shape, but also it's the Mark II. As I said, he's wearing denims. He has anklets rather than puttees. It was sort of a development. Depends who you ask, if they like puttees or gaiters. I'm not really too fussed on either. If you just turn to the side slightly. See, 2 buckles on the side, all mixed up in sort of one containing package. The British Army will go back to puttees, short puttees, in the post-war period as well. So they were sort of like a short-lived kind of thing, but they do still see service into the 60s. And the boots as well. So for the Great War, we had the B5, B2, and also other different styles of boots. And generally during the sort of the interwar period, British Army sort of standardised on their boot, coming to sort of what would be known as the ammo boot by the sort of service. So toe-capped, black, and with hobnails on the bottom. And all this sort of equipment, etc., is the 37 pattern equipment, which has been developed from experiences with the 08, and there are differences in there and with the size of it, etc. Thank you very much. Number 2, let's start. So here we have the number 2 on the gun. Again, a very stripped down version of the 37 pattern equipment. We have cartridge carriers. We also have a KD uniform, because again, this is the Mediterranean theatre. This is predominantly Italy. But you also see similar things in North Africa, etc. as well. Obviously carrying the gun itself, carrying the toolkit and advancing, etc. for the gun. And the rough sort of thing is basically almost identical to that of the number 1 that I just showed you just there. Thank you very much. Come up. So this is the number 3. So this is quite prominent of the early war period in the Second World War. So the EEF, around 1939-40, with a new uniform, as seen similar with the denims we saw, but also very much sort of step forward from what they had during the Great War, i.e. with service dress. So we have a short-waisted battle dress blouse and high-waisted trousers, taken off sort of the ski wear sort of the 30s, but also it's much more somewhat tailored in the sort of design, much more utilitarian in that example as well. Obviously, with the early war equipment, it's all in like a light pea green with the 37 pattern webbing. Again, cartridge carriers, haversack. Let's turn. So it's 37 pattern haversack, which is larger than that of the haversack during the Great War. Also, being early war as well, he has anti-gas cape. With gas cape high on the shoulders, which will easily be deployed from the strings. It will then fall down, and he's able to cover himself very easily. Also, on his arm, he's carrying a gas brassard as well. So the brassard itself changes colour when gas is in the air. Any droplets fall on it, it will change colour. And obviously his standard gas equipment in the front as well. As a number 3 on the gun, he's also carrying ammunition, the condenser and the condenser hose as well to support the gun. And his job is, as well as a number 4 on the gun, to keep the ammunition coming forward as did during the First World War. As you can see as well, the team in the Second World War is a lot smaller because the army had become more mechanised. So there's no need for a volume of guys to be with one gun. The duty of bringing more ammunition up more quickly and easily was done by the mechanisation of the Brent gun carriers, or the universal carriers I should say, as well as the vehicle motorised transport that will bring ammunition up to the firing line and the gun line itself. As I said, all roughly, basically similar to that of the other guys I've just showed you as well. So he's carrying his rifle, his helmet, etc. Thank you very much. And again, the number 4. Around here is very much showing the late war period. Yes, it is bad to put the suffix at the moment, but normally that'll be in Middlesex. It's just a case of what you have at the moment. So, late war 37 pound. This is basically the standard light set. So just have the haversack on, probably in this transport. But he has a new respirator bag, so it's a lightweight, new helmet, as started being issued in the summer of 1944 to 3rd Division, for example. So the Mark III turret helmet, as it sort of came to be known. But battle dress is basically almost unchanged. At the early war, there are more austerity patterns that begin to be released due to materials, etc. But it's basically the same. And again, the number 4 is carrying in ammunition, again, to keep that gun filled up, and will probably be going back and forth between them and the transport, etc. But basically, it's what would see service right up until the 1950s, and even into the 60s, with slight changes to the cut and etc. the battle dress. But it's basically the infantry that would be wearing in the Second World War, the later part of 1944 onwards. Thank you very much. So that basically covers, I know it was quite quick through, basically covers the sort of lifespan of the Vickers gun groups, etc. during the First and Second World Wars. There was a lot of change with also with the formation of the machine gun corps and sort of figuring out how these guns work within the army format, because obviously before machine gun corps formed, they were generally with the infantry battalions, and then they formed into a more centralised unit. And obviously with the Second World War, you have machine gun battalions, which then supported different brigades or divisions depending on what the job was really, as well as obviously one of the machine gun corps parts going off to become the tank corps, etc. as well during the First War, during the Great War, etc. So I hope that was informative. I'm sorry if I went through a bit too quickly, but I really hope that was any questions at all.
Okay, in both, you kind of pointed out about the 3, 4 and 5, whatever, 3 and 4, bringing up ammunition based on horse and mechanised.
Yeah.
I mean, typically, how far did they have to run? As in, how close was it? How much was it?
Yeah, it really depends on probably the situation you're in, really. Especially during the Great War, if you're in a static line, in a trench, etc., your ammunition will be obviously brought through the communication trenches through up to the front line, depending on what your job was. In the later war, when there's a bit more movement, that probably would change. You probably need more maybe mechanised or even horse transport to bring up your ammunition. But generally in the Second War, especially the late war, your mechanisation is quite absolute. You'll be brought up ammunition as regularly as you possibly can, depending on what your role was. So it really depends on situation to situation. But as a general rule, there was a method to get your ammunition up. If that answers your question. Any more at all?
Were there ever any breakouts in the First World War where the Vickers machine guns and these light crews were able to get to the action before any heavier equipment?
I'm not entirely sure. That's probably something you'll have to probably ask my lovely colleague Richard Fisher about. He's much more knowledgeable than me.
But we can try. Yes, They did. So where not necessarily purpose of machine guns in the offence are to go forward and consolidate and prepare for the defence. So machine guns move forward quite quickly. They're not necessarily going to get there before individual riflemen or normal infantry units, but they're certainly going to get there with more strength in many cases. So they would be moving forward, they would be moving over the same terrain. And Jake pointed out the small tripod on the gun carried by the number 2 on the gun there, so on the first World War gun. It's one of those things that it means that you can get the gun into action without having to wait for the rest of your group, and you can get it into action very, very quickly, so that you can almost fight the infantry. By the time 1918 comes, these are machine gun battalions are being used, certainly in the March offensives, independently of any other infantry action as well. So they are fighting almost as infantry in many of those cases that win the Victoria Cross, for example.
What about the logistics of the sort of changing of the uniforms of people who are being applied?
In regards to the Great War or
Great
just in
War,
general?
yeah. Great War.
So it depends on the role, and also what you're also about sort of traditions, especially with like the cavalry regiments. Like I said, with the lifeguards, they sort of kept like they were sort of short-lived in a way, but they sort of kept a tradition of more cavalry equipment, and it was a general rule as the number 1s, number 2s, and these number 3s more light order because they're carrying the gun or etc. the equipment, and also in different theatres. Like in the battalion, for example, it would, it's generally a relative thing, but depending where you were stationed, really, if that answers your question.
Potentially a silly question.
Yeah, no, it's
Given there was infantry machine gun corps and cavalry machine gun, was the expectation the cavalry machine gun corps would be more mobile, more lightly, I think you just mentioned the lightly equipped cavalry. Was it expected to be more mobile?
So, I think if my colleague, Matt, you could probably maybe focus on that maybe a bit more.
Yeah, so within the Machine Gun Corps, the cavalry side of that is a separate entity to the Machine Gun Guards Regiment. But within the Machine Gun Guards Regiment, the household cavalry battalions of that were actually on lorries. So they were corps troops, so they could move around the battlefield to get firepower where it was needed.
So it was expectation.
Yes, being on vehicles, it could move a lot easier than being on foot.
Thank you.
That's good. Thank you so much for coming to this one. Again, it's been a bit more speedy. I think it's getting quite warm in here, so especially with these guys carrying all this kit. So really, really appreciate it. And thank you very much. Thank you.
You're the photographer, right?
Yes.
What we had to do was use the opportunity of the advert.
Right out front of the chance, he was under pressure.
So I really hope you enjoyed that. Sorry if the audio is a bit off in some sort of bits, but in general it's actually quite good news. There's a few questions at the end as well, which are really good. And thankfully, Richard and my mate Matthew Palmer was there to help with some of the other questions, specific things which I wasn't too savvy on. But so really appreciate that there. Again, if you like this sort of content, please like and subscribe, but especially go over to Rich Fisher's channel, i.e. the Vickers Machine Gun Association channel, and like, subscribe, and watch his content because it is amazing, and the stuff he puts out is brilliant. As well as also looking up and supporting Matthew Moss with Fighting on Film and the Armourers bench as well. That'd be much appreciated. So I really hope you enjoyed. If you've got any comments, please leave them down below, and I'll see you later, guys. Bye for now.